My name is Alex. I come from a broken family raised by a controlling mother and her meddling sisters. Megan, the oldest, was 13 years older than me, and Anna was 10 years older. I guess I was an unplanned child to blame for my parents' separation. Dad left in 1977 when I was 5 and never came back. Throughout my childhood, I faced bullying at school and at home. All I longed for was my mother's love, a simple gesture of acceptance that never came. Despite the difficulties, I excelled in my studies, dedicating 12 years to my studies. Time has passed, and in 1993 I found myself at Kingston University in South London, grateful to have escaped from home life. There I met Holly, her image still vivid in my mind. She radiated beauty and confidence, while I remained shy and withdrawn. Holly was in her final year of a writing degree, which contrasted with my pursuit of a master's in mechanical engineering and design. Like I said, I was too timid to approach her, and she attracted men's attention effortlessly. At 5 feet 5 inches tall, with brown hair and enchanting hazel eyes, she possessed a beauty that I could not match. The men who pursued her were gregarious and popular. To my surprise, one of Holly's friends struck up a conversation with me at the party, which led to Holly's eventual inclusion. Despite my limited experience with women, my submissiveness and shyness seemed to attract her. Gathering up the courage, I asked her out, and we started dating. I am not ashamed to admit that she took away my purity, but after about 6 months there were rumors about her relationships with other men. Unable to substantiate the claims, I hesitated to confront her. Holly was a spoiled child, coddled by her parents and sister Caroline, which strained our relationship. I put up with her proper behavior, her penchant for making public scenes, making me uncomfortable. Although my friends urged me to end the relationship, I found myself in love, a feeling I had never felt before. After graduation, we both found jobs and apartments outside of Southampton, New Hampshire. Her family ties drew us there, as I had long severed ties with mine. A year later, we got married. The next year, Sophie was born, and after a couple of years, Ava. Holly loved motherhood, and everything seemed perfect between us. Over time, I progressed in my career and eventually joined Walker Engineering 10 years ago. The increased salary and bonuses helped us save for a better home, but like many of the recession years of 2008, it was a rough year. Many lost their jobs and it became harder to get contracts, forcing us to work longer hours without extra pay. It was during this time, when both girls were in school full-time, that I found out about Holly's affair with a man from our old university. Lost in the work, I didn't know until it was too late. Initially unsure of her lover's identity, Toby suspects a classmate who moved in next door. Holly's resistance proved futile as she laughed at my concerns even though I sensed her deception. However, my stable job and income allowed me to buy a nice house. Holly constantly pushed me to buy a house that reflected our status, whatever that meant. Despite my reservations, I agreed, and we bought a lovely 5-bedroom detached house in Southampton. It was a buyer's market, so we got a good deal despite the slightly high mortgage. One thing I did that was unusual for me was to open a new savings account in my name only. I only put my share of the bonus into it, and since I did all the finances and banking as the sole breadwinner, I doubt Holly even knew about it, even though I waved the receipts in front of her. In retrospect, it turned out to be one of the smartest things I could have done. I needed security because I wasn't sure if Holly was planning to leave me if her old flame came back. After that incident, things seemed to return to normal, and my daughters remained my top priority. I supported their education and spent a lot of time with them on weekends, taking them to various activities such as dance classes, concerts, and the zoo. Holly always seemed too preoccupied with going out with her indulgent and idle friends. I rarely interacted with other husbands, but we all seemed to be under the control of our wives to some extent, to varying degrees. My friends would tease me with Under My Thumb by the Rolling Stones every time I had to cancel plans for something Holly wanted. Even at work, my colleagues commented on my marital status, especially Holly's dominance over me. It was only a few months ago that everything came to a head. Ava has just gone off to university, leaving Holly and I alone for the first time in 18 years. Both our daughters studied at our old alma mater. As I was helping Ava settle into her new apartment with her sister, she turned to me and asked why I was still with their mother. I was surprised because Ava was always quiet like her old man. I heard she was playing with Henry Walker in your company, Ava said, tears welling up in her eyes. It was news to me, but I wasn't shocked. Over the years, I could have investigated her affairs, but held back for fear that it would tear the family apart, and caused my daughters to resent me, just as my sisters did to their father. I put up with her infidelity because I couldn't lose what we created even though I still loved her. This discovery had several effects on me. First, it made me realize the depth of my daughters' animosity toward their mother, far greater than I could have imagined. Second, it brought up old feelings about my upbringing and how it affected my weaknesses. I finally realized that I'd become the target of gossip and ridicule at work, especially from Henry Walker, who happened to be the nephew of the owner and the man who betrayed me. I felt completely lost, unable to continue to endure this situation, especially now that my youngest daughter knew about Holly's taunts. I knew I had to stand up to her. My heart raced as I sat at the kitchen table waiting for Holly to return. When she finally appeared, I felt like I couldn't speak. She just looked at me with what appeared to be apathy and disdain as she unpacked her bags. Eventually, I worked up the courage to speak. I asked Holly about the nature of her relationship with someone else. She replied that she would not classify it as a novel, insisting that it was not that important. I felt a mixture of shock and disgust as I waited for her to explain how her actions could be justified. She expressed her admiration for me as a provider and friend, but acknowledged that there were certain needs that I could not meet. I was confused by her direct admission and asked if this meant she was cheating on me. Holly clarified that it was only her body involved, not her heart or mind. Impressed by her bold confession, I was left speechless. She casually mentioned exploring relationships with young men. Surprised, I raised my voice, questioning her actions. Holly warned me not to shout, and even though she was involved with 2 other men, she expected my silence. She threatened me with the choice of accepting her terms or risking my departure to be with someone else. I remained silent, hoping she would notice the pain on my face. In an attempt to justify her actions, she claimed that such behavior was common among her friends and could even improve a marriage. I was horrified by her attempt to use her friend's actions as an excuse, finding it contemptuous and self-centered. Challenging her with the idea of having another woman, she scoffed at the suggestion, mocking my ability to develop relationships with other women. She confidently stated that our relationship would continue on her terms, warning me not to spoil a good deal. Actually, she was right. Throughout our 22-year relationship, I have shown unwavering loyalty and obeyed her wishes. Now everyone knew that they were betraying me, ruining my reputation among friends and colleagues. The next morning, I walked into my office and was greeted by Henry Walker, a man associated with my wife. With a smirk, he asked about Alex's well-being, his smug expression adding to my frustration. I decided to remain silent. I heard some men laughing near the coffee maker. Despite their amusement, I continued past them, feeling exposed. Even Olivia, the boss's secretary, seemed to find my situation amusing. Sitting at my desk, I reflected on the rough start to my day, feeling laughed at both at work and at home. Despite my efforts to focus, my anger remained. I decided to delve into the history of my father, knowing only his place of birth and departure at the age of 38 in 1977. Searching the Cambridgeshire family history sites, I found a few potential matches. Anticipating his death before my college years, I narrowed it down to 3 options and posted queries on genealogy sites. After thinking about it, my boss Jack called me into his office. Jack, a successful but morally questionable man, wanted to talk. Despite thinking about leaving because of his behavior, his persuasion and high salary kept me. I found out about his affair with his secretary Olivia without knowing about his 3rd wife. He mentioned directly that he had heard rumors about my wife's infidelity. I retorted, mentioning her relationship with my nephew. He acknowledged the behavior, smiled about the family trait of rude people, leaving me speechless. The focus shifted to business. He stressed the importance of family and warned that if personal issues affected the business, I might have to leave the company. It was staged like a strict teacher scolding a child. I bit my lip as I noticed Olivia, his impatient secretary, lingering by the door, probably gathering information to share with her friends. As I turned to leave, I couldn't help but wonder why a young woman like her would hook up with an older man like Jack Walker. I heard an even bigger giggle as I passed her, which made me put my head down and walk away. As the door closed behind me, there was a burst of laughter, clearly aimed at my expense. Returning to the office, I realized that my presence there was pointless. I funded my daughter's education, but now I was essentially funding my wife's infidelity. I was a simple guy who used his gadgets, but could live without frills. Most of my expenses went to Holly's indulgence, which made me doubt my happiness. It was my haven for creativity and success. I designed many of the parts that are manufactured and sold here, and I was sure I could find work elsewhere. They thought I was weak, and they weren't wrong. I wasn't one to cause trouble. I was content to be good old Alex, a humble engineer. Glancing at my family vacation screensaver, I clicked on my email. To my surprise, I received a message from a woman called Jennifer Holmes from the Cambridge Genealogical Committee. Surprised by the quick response, I read the message and was impressed. Jennifer read my inquiry about my father and contacted a woman who claimed to be his niece, Rachel Murray, my cousin. I responded immediately with my contact information, hoping to hear from Rachel soon. Leaving work brought some relief, and when I got home, Holly greeted me with a smile as she made dinner. Although I initially distanced myself, I came back to eat. She gently asked if we could discuss last night, to which I replied that there seemed to be little left to discuss, as she had made her position clear. In response, she almost begged, recognizing my qualities as a husband and asking me not to deny her anything. I doubted her betrayal and humiliation, looking for an honest answer. Shocked, she shrugged, unable to give a satisfactory answer. Tired of her selfishness, I reflected on my efforts to make her happy. Despite working long hours to meet our financial needs and wants, all I received was disrespect and abuse. I even drove an old car so she could have a newer one. She recognized that I had needs that I could not satisfy and gave me an ultimatum: accept it as she assumed I would, or she would seek pleasure with a younger man. I interjected by mentioning Henry Walker's name, stating that everyone knew he was related to her. She admitted her involvement, directly stating that he was essentially my boss and would inherit the company. She outlined the order. He met her needs in bed, and when I didn't obey and accept, she would leave me, and he provided everything else she wanted and needed. As usual, I didn't say anything and just got up from my seat and walked away to my office. Tears flowed. I wanted to be anywhere but here. When the phone rang, I answered and heard an unfamiliar voice on the other end. It was Rachel. We talked for about an hour, and when I hung up, everything else faded from my memory and I smiled widely. Rachel was thrilled that I had decided to research my father's past, and I had something to share. I discovered that my mother had actually kicked my father out of the house, cheating on me throughout my childhood. Sadly, he died in 1983 when I was only 11. He died of drink poisoning, and my grandmother always blamed my mother for his behavior and mental state. Rachel told me that after he left us, he wanted to reconnect with me, but he wasn't allowed to. We arranged to meet at the weekend at her house in Cambridge. I was excited knowing that the break would be beneficial. The rest of the week dragged on. At home, things remained the same, and at work they constantly mocked me behind my back. Henry and his friends thought it amusing to hang a pair of underwear on my office door. I glanced at Olivia, but she was silent. A note was placed in the underwear with the inscription, "Please give back to my wife." I was devastated. I sat at my desk and cried again that day. I wanted to blame everyone but myself. I couldn't wait. When Saturday came around, I told Holly that I was visiting a friend in London, and she seemed indifferent to my plans. I suspected she would be unfaithful, so being away made it easier for her. The journey to Cambridge proved hectic, and I arrived at Rachel's house an hour later than expected. Surprisingly, she greeted me with the warmest hug I've received in years and didn't seem fazed by the delay. I met her husband Greg and their children, Grace and William, after which we immersed ourselves in discussions about my father and our new family. Rachel's warm and selfless demeanor was evident as she and Greg chatted animatedly, often finishing each other's sentences in an effort to share our family history. We were joined by David and Lucy Price, my cousin and Rachel's brother. We bonded well, sharing thoughts about my father and family. After lunch, we took a short drive, giving me time to reflect. Upon returning, David and I discussed our work and family life, and for some reason I found myself confiding in my new cousins. They offered continued support, advising me not to put up with my current situation. Leaving Cambridge left me with a new perspective. After enduring many lies and mistreatment, the kindness and honesty of my new family gave me hope. I realized that I needed to regain happiness not only for myself, but also for my daughters, friends, and this new family. When I got home at 8 p.m., I found Holly getting ready to go out. I asked her about her plans, and she said she was going out with friends. Catching her off guard, I mentioned her second lover, Max. She asked me to stop talking about it, seemingly indifferent to my feelings. I urged her to stop and be my wife. Dismissing my concerns, she insisted that she was and always would be my wife. She asked me not to deny her pleasures, promising to make my life easier, and assured me that she would be back by midnight. Ignoring my pleas, she continued to threaten, trying to hug me when I turned away. Unfazed, she grabbed her Prada handbag and headed for the door. Asserting my position as her husband, I sternly begged her not to go ahead with her plans. She paused, looking at me as if questioning my authority before roaring. She mockingly asked what I would do, claiming that I would never have the courage to leave her, and predicting that I would always be by her side. Dejected, I hung my head, realizing that I had been a fool for too long, catering to her selfishness while neglecting my own needs. It's time to end the charade and make plans for change. I wasted no time in taking action. Actually, I started when she was with Henry or Max, or maybe both. This is probably what she meant by giving in to her desires and having it all. My thoughts fueled my anger, causing me to lose focus. I had to find a way to destroy all remaining attachment to her, and I think I found a solution. I found a box with a picture of my mom and my sisters, the only one I had. Despite my skepticism, I cut out a picture of Holly's face and pasted it next to them. If there's no love left in them, adding Holly's grinning face to the picture might just break my emotional bonds. Placing it on my desktop around 12:45 a.m., I completed the task. I mostly worked out my short-term plans, even though they might take a few weeks to come to fruition. Fortunately, I had the luxury of time, as Holly was not expecting my departure. Despite my insecurities and need for help, I convinced myself until then to follow through. I heard someone clumsily enter through the door, and looking out the window, I witnessed Henry Walker's departure. When I heard her coming up the stairs, I hastily cleared my browsing history, deciding to use incognito mode from now on. After she retired to our bedroom, I went downstairs to make some coffee. Thinking about my future away from here, especially without my daughters, I found it tolerable. After deciding to move closer to my daughters on Monday morning, I headed to work and decided not to stress anymore. Undeterred by the scathing remarks and laughter directed at me, I made an appointment with the bank for 1 p.m., using the time before to review my finances. Although a gamble, if it worked out and with the right support, I would have come out relatively unscathed. The meeting went ahead as planned, allowing me to close my savings account and remove my name from our joint account. With a tidy sum in hand, I closed the savings account to receive the cash. On my way back to the office, I stopped at PC World, purchasing 2 digital voice recorders, a 500 GB USB 3.0 hard drive, and a new PC hard drive. When I got back, I started accessing the company's customer personal files, and it took me an hour to crack Jack's password, ironically his wife's name, and his 6-digit birthday. After securing the necessary access, I downloaded all the files to disk along with my plans and designs for an energy-efficient hydraulic pump system, positioning the company for continued success. We produce pumps for air conditioners, heavy machinery, and even for the dairy industry. After clearing my PC's history, including all plans and work, I turned it off, replaced the hard drive with a new one, put everything in my bag, and reinstalled Windows. I spent the rest of the day researching competitors on my phone and looking at engineering jobs in the South London, Surrey area on Monster before calling it a day. That evening, after another quiet dinner, I went to my office. When I discovered that a major competitor that was struggling during the financial downturn was looking for a mechanical engineer to do basic design and shop management, I was intrigued. While it wasn't exactly what I wanted, it was close. Even though the offer was £10,000 less than my current one, I immediately emailed them my CV. To keep up appearances with Holly, I decided to sleep in our matrimonial bed that night. However, I made sure I pretended to be asleep when she entered. Her touch made me feel nauseous, but strangely enough, it felt good to react in this way. I felt a push back from her that would help me in the long run. The next day, I received a phone call from a surprised Robert Williams of Sutton Hydraulics, who expressed his disbelief about my possible transfer from Walker Engineering to his smaller firm. Although he almost immediately offered me the job, the next day I asked for an interview, to which he agreed. Another important part fell into place, and everything went quickly. With plenty of time, I started researching apartments in the area and ended up finding one just 15 minutes from my daughter and 5 minutes from work. I scheduled a viewing the day after my interview with Robert Williams. Afterwards, I informed Jack of the need to visit my daughters in Kingston the next day to sign some papers, to which he casually agreed. That night, I called my old friend Toby Brown, arranging to meet him and his wife Sarah the following evening after my interview, and viewing of the apartment. Toby and Sarah, knowing I had something on my mind, eagerly awaited my explanation. Before I met them, I talked to my daughters about the situation and got their support and understanding. At the meeting with Toby and Sarah, I revealed the details of the initial phase of my plans. Their surprise at my decision to fight back outweighed any shock at Holly's infidelity, which they thought was a common occurrence. Sarah asked about my decision to leave Holly, offering me another cup of tea. I recounted the revelations of the meeting with the cousins, including how my mother and sisters had driven my father out of the house by siding with her. I noted that this time my daughters supported me. Toby expressed concern, wondering if the revelation at the meeting had pushed me to stand up for myself. I clarified that it was while visiting my father's grave that I noticed something on the stone that moved me and made me decide to leave. Both asked at the same time about what I saw on the memorial stone. I shared that it had a picture of a rose with the words, "In remembrance," followed by my father's date of birth and age at death, coincidentally, my current age. Toby and Sarah flinched a little, showing their understanding. I explained that I was faced with a choice when I faced moments that could lead to drinking, love, or worse, as my grandmother believed. I decided not to imitate my father, and instead decided to fight back. I continued, showing that I would no longer sacrifice myself in an attempt to be the perfect husband while enduring abuse and ridicule. I confessed to my friends, feeling vulnerable about how low I had sunk. Sarah offered to help and shared her plan to protect herself and get revenge on Holly. I smiled and nodded, appreciating Sarah's firmness despite my earlier suspicions of her affair. Explaining my financial strategy, I said that in 2008, I had set up a separate savings account by depositing all my bonuses and extra money. To get a mortgage, only my name was required, which made it easier for me to apply for a loan. I outlined Toby's role in transferring title to my house to a new company he would set up to settle the mortgage, transfer the deeds through the land registry. Toby expressed skepticism about the plan, but I assured him that Holly would have no means of challenging it. I pointed out that her religious parents, after learning of her infidelity, prioritized their principles over support. They agreed, and even offered to help cover the mortgage by allowing me to defer the payment. On the way home, I visited a local Land Rover dealership where I arranged to trade Holly's car in for the latest model. We ended the payment plan for the Range Rover Sport she had in order to benefit the dealership from its resale. I assured the dealer that I would return for my own upgrade, knowing that he could recoup Holly's car by selling it practically new. I apologized for any inconvenience, but explained that the prospect of selling me an expensive new Range Rover would more than make up for it. On my way out, I picked up the 2016 brochure, not for myself, but for Holly. When she got home, she was sitting in the living room drinking coffee and looking pale. I took off my jacket and threw my bag on the floor, getting ready to execute the second part of the plan. I expressed my love for Holly and my wish for the best for her. I stated that I would trade in her car and buy her a new 2017 model, pointing to it in the brochure. Expressing her enthusiasm, she exclaimed that she loved the new car, unaware of my plan. She recognized my ability to make her feel better, mentioning the only hiccup was that they already had a buyer for my car. She offered to take it to the dealership by Friday afternoon, leaving work early to complete the task. She offered me the use of her car for the weekend to visit her lovers, causing her to flinch at the last remark, a look of shock and confusion on her face. After asking what was wrong, I pushed her to understand the situation. She didn't mention anything specific, but asked if I was upset about our arrangement. I clarified that this was not our arrangement, but rather hers, stressing that I had no right to this. I asked if I had no choice but to accept it, hoping for an answer. She just nodded, looking like she was asserting her dominance, and I surrendered. Despite the circumstances, she declared that she loved me, showing genuine concern. I didn't answer and went to the kitchen. My phone started ringing, so I headed to the garden to take the call. Toby confirmed that the money had been transferred. I was ready to go the next day. Without further ado, I entered the bank and was ushered into the mortgage specialist's office. Within an hour, the mortgage was paid off, and all my remaining accounts were closed. I went a few doors down and opened a new account at another bank. I was content knowing that I wouldn't have to pay anything more unless Holly took legal action and took me to court. My smile faded. The next day, I went to the land registry and filled out the appropriate online application. With all the details of Toby and Sarah's new company within 10 minutes of applying, I received a confirmation email saying it would take 5 days. Once that is done, I just hand over the paperwork to Toby and he can register the property to his company. That same day I knocked on Jack's door. Olivia was with him as usual. He usually dealt with her on Fridays and I believe I ended their intimacy. She left us alone. Placing my resignation letter on his desk, he looked at me with that stupid smile on his face. He asked what document I had in my hands. I replied that it was my resignation and expressed my belief that it would be better to leave immediately, considering the situation with our families. I assumed he might not want me around for too long. He looked stunned by the news. I boldly requested that my P45 be ready by Monday and emphasized that I would not mention my departure to anyone, that Holly did not know. He pleaded pathetically, insisting that they needed me. I countered that they probably needed his nephew more. I informed him that I would be back on Monday to pick up the last things. Deliberately, I pretended to throw the pin out of my pocket, taking the opportunity to remove the digital recorder from my sock. After constructing a pin for it, I pressed record and discreetly placed it under the seat and into the wooden frame as I stood up. At the end of the conversation, I mentioned that I had business and left his office. In parting, I told him not to crawl back when he was broke, suggesting that the only thing keeping his cheating wife with him was his money. I smiled, knowing that it touched a nerve. Turning, I left his office. An hour later, I drove home, picked up the car and Holly's logbook, and left her car at the dealership. John Reeves kindly offered to drive me home, and I gratefully accepted. When I got home that night, Holly was sitting at the kitchen table with big red bags under her eyes. I knew she was crying. I asked her what happened. She reluctantly told me she had gonorrhea. I laughed. Oh, did I laugh? She just looked at me. He offered to take medicine to get back to normal, and the tension in the air was palpable. That night, for the first time in months, I slept well. The next morning, I slept in the spare room and felt refreshed. A good night's sleep has done wonders for me. I entered our bedroom and gently woke Holly, explaining that I was giving her a place to rest and recover. Holly expressed her belief that I found her disgusting, to which I remained silent. Tears began to stream down her cheeks as she admitted that she had messed up badly. She confessed her love for me and expressed her desire for me to get better. At first, I felt sympathy for her, but it faded faster than expected. This surprised me. Then I realized that I had lost all love for the woman I had been married to for 21 years. Could love fade so quickly? Obviously, I did, because I was done, and her situation didn't affect me. I left the room. Without saying a word, I got into the car and happily drove off. That night, I stayed with Toby and Sarah, who had arranged a dinner with many friends and colleagues. When I got home late Sunday morning, I found Holly doing the housework. Entering the living room, she rushed to me and hugged me when she saw me. I just patted her back. Excited, I offered to arrange for the new car to arrive, offering to drop her off in town to meet her sister, who could then drive her to the dealership. I pictured her driving back in the new Range Rover, and she smiled as she approached me with open arms. Turning back to the kettle, I pretended not to notice her. Throughout the day, Holly was overly affectionate, making me feel uncomfortable. She persistently tried to kiss or hug me, but I kept finding excuses to leave. Before going to sleep, I noticed that she had cried again. After bidding her goodnight, she asked if I would sleep with her and expressed her desire to snuggle and hear reassurances. Feeling nothing, I replied that it wouldn't happen until she got all the information from the doctor. I firmly argued that she had made the bed, to which she bitterly responded by stating that when she felt better, she would be sure to find a man who would want to be in bed with her, as she had a lot of lost time to make up for. I laughed to myself. It took longer than expected, but it was done, and the stiffness came back. All the regrets from Friday night are gone, leaving behind 21 years of resentment. In the past, I would have succumbed to her manipulation, but this time I ignored her tears and headed to the spare room. This will be my last night in my house, and it will be in a spare room. I was also relieved that she said those things. It destroyed any doubts I might have had. When I looked at my picture of her and my sisters, all I could feel was hatred for her. She was only cute when she wanted something and ugly when she didn't get it. I woke up early on Monday morning. Holly was also up early for her 8.30 hair appointment, so I took her to town as planned. I left knowing it might be the last time I see her. I was afraid it wouldn't happen, but I was determined to make it happen. On the way, I called the cell phone company and canceled our contracts. When I got to the stop, I paid the fine on my card. I was told that the phones would be open until 5 p.m. Perfect. I then headed to the office to pick up my P45. I walked into the factory, greeted by a somber atmosphere. Word of my departure seemed to spread, briefly drawing startled looks from my colleagues. Not knowing the reason for their concern, I walked down the hall to my office, past the coffee machine where the usual group had gathered. Not knowing if Max and Henry were aware of their shared involvement with my wife, they smiled at me as they exchanged jokes with the others. I greeted them with fake joy, saying good morning. They asked about my wife, eliciting the usual laugh at a recurring joke that I didn't find amusing. I replied that she was not well, attributing it to one of them giving her an unwanted surprise. I left them in stunned silence, and when I looked back, their jaws dropped, causing a commotion before I went upstairs. Approaching Olivia, she gave a half smile and lowered her head, perhaps indicating that I was now earning respect. Jack appeared at the door before I could knock. He claimed he had what I wanted, ordered me to take it and leave. Perhaps this respect was just my imagination. Entering his office, I sat down, inconspicuously slipping the recorder into my pocket from under the chair. I knew he had his usual Friday date with Olivia, and now I wrote it down. He snapped, asking if I had another job. Ignoring him at first, I softened and replied that I had nothing. A smile appeared on his face, probably anticipating that I would come crawling back. I asked about my salary for the last month and my bonus for the year, to which he laughed. Olivia came in with my P45S, and when she asked what was so funny, Jack explained that I had asked for my bonus and pay, thinking it was rich. Olivia chimed in laughing. Deciding to join in, I responded with a laugh, causing them to stop and stare at me in disbelief. Olivia asked why I was laughing, and I responded by asking her why she lets the old man use her every week. My laughter grew louder and they froze, Olivia's eyes widening and Jack's face turning red with anger. In response to Jack's anger, he spat, calling me a scoundrel and ordering me out of his office and out of his company before the boys pulled me by the ears. Smiling, I left, gathering the last things from my office. Still laughing to myself, I got home, unloaded the back seats, opened the trunk, and entered the house. Looking around the rooms, I wondered what to bring with me. After receiving some of Romero Britt's artwork, I wrapped them in plastic found in the garage and loaded them into the car. I walked around the house collecting various things, then emptied my wardrobe upstairs. I took all my important documents from the safe, including the girls' birth certificates and marriage certificate. Using the attic ladder, I retrieved my old belongings, including my diploma and family photos. In the master bedroom, I have collected all the jewelry I have given Holly over the years, worth over 10,000 pounds in total. She also took away all the purchased handbags, shoes, and expensive coats. In fact, the entire wardrobe was my property, so I took everything. Given my meticulous record-keeping for insurance purposes, this would prove useful when selling everything. After I finished packing, I realized I was going to need a TV, so I grabbed it along with my movie collection and Blu-ray player. By now, my car was too full. I decided to throw away all of Holly's clothes and a few other junk, including some of my old clothes. Anumi needed a new wardrobe and the girls would be happy to help me out. I collected the best pictures of me and the girls and packed them in the car. Take your time as Holly won't be back until after 2 p.m. Took a moment for a cup of tea. Definitely, I believe it's in the Magna Carta, called the telco, and canceled the satellite phone and internet. Also contacted British Gas and Southern Water to cancel utilities. It would take a few days, but I didn't care. Went back to the bedroom and sat on the bed when I noticed something that gave me an idea that scared even me. Holly's wedding dress sat at the top of the wardrobe in an old, dusty box. She loved it probably more than I did. Took it off and found our wedding album among the boxes of photos on the bed. He grabbed the duvet cover, gathered everything and went to the garden. Dumped everything in a pile, including Holly's clothes and things I couldn't sell. She left her underwear untouched. She didn't want any reminders. Closed the car and looked at the time, only 1:45 p.m. Called Robert Williams and told him I'll drop my P45 in later with the night shift. Looking forward to a fresh start tomorrow. He looked pleased, and I hoped I made his day. At 2 p.m., I sat waiting for the call, found paint thinner in the garage and poured it all over the wedding dress in the garden. Just as I was about to light the fire, my phone rang. I answered calmly and Holly's voice came on the phone demanding to know what was going on. I replied sarcastically, asking what she meant. Insisting that I should not make a fool of myself, she continued to question me. I asked her to calm down, asked what was happening. It was quiet and I could hear her heavy breathing and what sounded like her sister in the background. She mentioned that she was told that I didn't buy her a new car, I sold it. I mockingly mentioned that I might have forgotten about it. She began to panic, asking what was going on. Keeping calm despite my broken heart, I informed her that from now on, if she wanted a car, she could pay for it herself. She yelled back, expressing her confusion and frustration. I repeated that she heard me well and added that I needed to clean up the kitchen. She asked if it was some kind of bad joke, to which I said nothing. She stated that we would talk about it when she got home, expressing her displeasure at being split up on her. I was silent. I hung up the phone amid her continued screams of my name. Going outside, I clicked a match and lit a fire. Our story burned when I left. Pulling our marriage license out of my pocket, I tore it into shreds and left it on the kitchen table next to our lone Disneyland photo of happier times. I wondered if she remembered those moments fondly. Getting into the car, I drove. When I got to the end of the street, I saw Holly and Jennifer in the rearview mirror, rushing into the house without looking up. With a smile, I turned off the phone and drove on. I reached Sutton by 4 p.m. Deciding I had time on my hands, I visited a nearby phone shop to sign up for a new mobile contract. I also got a team of admins at work to process my P45 and met Freya, my new secretary who, unlike Olivia, exuded professionalism despite her youth. Back in my empty apartment, I made tea with a kettle borrowed from home. I unpacked and ordered pizza for dinner. Checking my old phone, I found it was disabled. A smile crossed my lips, knowing that Holly was now also without her phone, giving the girls a break before my inevitable contact. After setting up my sleeping bag in the living room, I waited for dinner. The furniture will arrive over the weekend, but so far I've loved the distance from Holly. Turning on the laptop, I accessed the records from Jack Walker's office, revealing his affair with Olivia. After downloading the evidence, I made copies on USB drives, addressing them to Jack's wife, Margaret, and Olivia's boyfriend, Peter. I planned to ship them the next day. Finally, I called my daughter Sophie to give her the update, cautioning against informing her mother of my whereabouts, which she had not yet done given Holly's lack of communication. Over the next week, I furnished my flat and started referring clients from Walker Engineering to Sutton. Although there were a few loyal to Jack, most preferred our suggestions, resulting in the loss of Walker. I waited for Jack to reveal the reason for the decline of his business, but I was indifferent. When the utilities were shut off at my former home, Holly felt my absence as she struggled with the bills. Toby initiated the process of selling the house, bolstered by Sarah's enthusiasm, and by the end of the week, signs were adorning the property. At this time, Ava contacted me to say that Holly had moved into her parents' home, where her infidelity continued to be rejected. Holly was seething with anger at me, which made me strangely happy, even though I knew the saga wasn't over. Over the weekend, Toby and Sarah had another successful lunch, offering a momentary respite from my escape plan. Sunday brought promising news. After only a week on the market, I received 2 serious offers for £550,000, one of which I accepted straight away. In preparation for completion, I arranged for the girls to ice and invest, making sure Toby was compensated and providing some cash for my safety. Protecting myself remained a priority. During the week, Toby's news that the sale could go ahead filled me with excitement. I immediately contacted a removal company and had them clear out my former home. Meanwhile, the girls contacted their mother, who responded with increased anger and threats. After assuring the girls that the trouble would soon be over, I consoled them. On Tuesday morning, while speaking with a new client who recently met with Jack Walker to discuss a possible contract extension, I learned about the dire situation of Walker Engineering. The client indicated that the company had to lay off 50% of its staff due to a significant loss of projects. He also informed me of Mrs. Walker's decision to divorce Jack because of his infidelity. Despite this revelation, I felt no sympathy. My mind was busy counting commission checks. While I didn't know the fate of Olivia and her boyfriend, I knew he had received my gift. Whether Mrs. Walker got hers or not, the reason for their quick divorce was undoubtedly clear. I reasoned that Mrs. Walker's friends and family would think about her affair with an older man. In recognition of my efforts, I was awarded a new Land Rover Discovery HSE. Although I planned to treat myself beforehand, Robert and the executives were so pleased with my work and the trajectory of the company that they gifted me the car, along with a substantial commission of over £30,000. Looking out my office window at my new car, I was surprised when a familiar Ford Focus pulled into the parking lot. I discovered that the car belonged to Diane, Holly's mother. Anticipating an imminent confrontation, I braced myself when the phone rang in my office. My secretary, Freya, informed me that there was a woman in the reception area who pretended to be my wife. I instructed her to inform the woman that I was in a meeting and would be back in an hour. 3 hours later, I looked out the window and saw her still waiting. Sighing, I decided to leave for the night, ready to confront her if necessary or just pass by if she didn't notice me. I walked out the side door and headed for my car. As I was about to sit down, I heard a screeching tire, and before I knew it, she blocked me with her car. Once out, she lunged at me with a fury evident in her disheveled appearance. Clearly distressed and dressed in shabby clothes similar to those of her sister, her unkempt hair added to her disheveled appearance. "You're a damn idiot!" she shouted, trying to slap me but missed. Fueled by anger, she demanded retribution. Urging her to calm down, I invited her to get into the car with me. Surprised by the appearance of the new car, she expressed her financial difficulties and asked me to return it. I let her know that because I couldn't meet her needs and wasn't a match for her young lovers, I felt redundant in her life. Then she asked me to come home, expressing her desire to get out of this situation and forgiving me. I couldn't believe my ears and asked if she was joking. She confirmed that she forgave me for destroying her things and her life. While doubting her apology, I pointed out the blatant deception, disrespect, and her audacity to demand forgiveness. I firmly stated that I would never be with her again and coldly suggested that she go to one of her lovers. She mentioned that her friends treated her differently now that they were separated, and their husbands questioned their fidelity. While admitting some responsibility for her misfortunes, I still sympathized with her. She admitted that she took responsibility for her actions, wasting a good life because of greed and disrespect. Even so, I knew I had to move forward. She begged me to come back into her life, claiming that she had nothing left. She inquired about her share of the house and said she needed a divorce. I pointed out that she never once said she loved me, saying she just needed me, but I didn't need her. I told them I had defaulted on my mortgage and lost my house, admitting to lying. Her reaction was shocking, and I understood the purpose of her visit. After declaring my desire for a divorce, she pleaded with me desperately, claiming that she loved me. After more than 20 years of living together, she came forward, admitting her mistake and demanding severe punishment. I emphasized that this was a huge, unforgivable mistake, stating firmly that I would never go back. She screamed and begged, filling the car with her screams. After making the offer, I offered a clean break and offered £30,000 cash if she accepted. Her demeanor changed and she became more determined. She screamed, threatened to fight me in court for everything, claiming that I didn't lose the house and was too smart for that. Acknowledging her right, I found myself on the defensive. I began by stating firmly that she would not receive a penny from me. She approached me and I explained that I would fight with her for everything and even more. I argued that she had no money and I would transfer my assets to make it difficult for her to find them. I warned her that by the time her attorney found anything, the account would wipe out any income. I gave her a choice: take the money offered or face the consequences of a legal battle without breaking eye contact. She exclaimed angrily, expressing her love and accusing me of ill treatment. She went on to state that because of her, our girls would flourish, contrasting their future virtues with her perceived shortcomings. I told her to take the money and get out of my life, and she spat back by agreeing to take the money and proceed with the divorce. I replied that I would arrange it, and she got out of my car, closing the door. A few moments later, she ran out of the parking lot. The next day, I started divorce proceedings, citing infidelity. A week later, I arranged with Holly to meet at the girls' apartment. Although the sale of my house was completed, I held off on investing until the papers were signed. It turned out to be difficult to maintain politeness in front of the girls. I handed Holly the money, and she proceeded to sign the papers. After saying goodbye to the girls and wishing Holly the best of luck, I prepared to leave. Holly suddenly burst into tears, although I felt it might have been more for the girls' benefit. Sophie and Ava exchanged knowing glances. Ava mentioned that she would meet me the following weekend, referring to the Coldplay concert, which they were very excited about. I returned to the room where Holly continued to sob, unnoticed by the others. Suddenly, I realized what Ava meant about the concert. Sophie inquired about our plans, and I mentioned checking with Amy and letting them know within a week of leaving. Ignoring Holly's screams as I left, I closed the door behind me.